Hey, man.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you? Oh, hold on. My volume's pretty low. How are you?
Uh, all things considered,
Okay. Good, good.
you
Yeah.
know. But fortunately, I'm with Pernell. I avoid that stuff as much as I can. Like Tuesday made brownies day before yesterday, and apparently the recipe called for it must have been huge amounts of baking cocoa.
Uh-huh.
I had I had about what was maybe it's about that thick, and it was only 2 inches long and maybe about an inch wide. It wasn't a very big piece.
Yeah.
And I had that one piece, and about 30 minutes later, I started feeling really uncomfortable and tense,
Oh,
and
wow.
it was. And I got, wow, that's some form of caffeine.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, and, really unpleasant.
Yeah.
But yet, I'm strangely drawn towards it, and I wish I wasn't.
Yeah. I get that. I get that.
Drawn towards things that make you feel like crap.
Yeah. I think there might be something underneath that.
I've suspected there is, and it's one of those things I haven't gotten a satisfactory answer towards yet. But that's been one of those things that's kind of on this list of things that I hope that will be revealed in one way or another over the course of this process.
Yeah.
Because I've wondered about that. I've wondered about all of the things like that, the caffeine, the alcohol, which, alcohol is fortunately not a problem. It hasn't been for a very long time. But, other things have reared their head over the years. And, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating to feel compelled towards things, especially when they make you feel kind of rotten.
Well, I think the question there is, what does that compulsion feel like? Like when you say you're compelled towards it, what does that actually mean?
There is a desire to have or use it against my better knowledge of how it will affect me, how it will affect others, because caffeine really alters my mood to the point that, I can be difficult to be around. So a desire to use it that is irrational in the face of the consequences or the results of using it.
Couple.
And not having, I guess, I don't know how else to say it, not having an adequate defense against that feeling of being compelled to take, have, or use, whatever that might be.
Yeah. So a couple follow-up questions are: one, is it always the substance, or is it the vessel of the substance? So in other words, is it a compulsion towards caffeine, or is it the taste of the coffee, or the, conditioned enjoyment of having a beer, or having a brownie, or whatever the thing is? Is it the substance that's involved, or is it the other aspects of the?
It tends to be both, although the ratio can shift. Like, for instance, I really hadn't had any desire to use any caffeine. And then when she made those brownies, I knew that, there was some in there. I didn't know how much.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though I thought, probably better to leave this alone, I still felt compelled to, because of the fact that it was a brownie, it was sweet, that hit of pleasure you get when you first bite into it.
Yeah.
And that seems to always be the case. It seems to be whatever mood or mind altering chemical might be in there, and then something about the overall package that may be attractive in some way. Sometimes leans more one way, sometimes leans more the other.
So that leads me to my second question, which is, what is happening just before you have that urge? Like, what is going on in your situation, in your life? She bakes brownies, but there is something there which is making those brownies craveable, which wouldn't be there in other different circumstances. So when you say that, you use the term like I forgot the term they use, like not mind numbing, but the numbing,
Mood or mind altering?
the mind altering. Yeah, there you go. What is it that is here before you eat the brownie that you're trying to alter? Why does this need to be altered?
That's a really good question, because it seems like so far as I've gotten, and this is actually recent, even though you think it would be obvious, it was only just in the last week in response to a question that a friend of mine asked me that I realized that the two things I have in my life which have that kind of, what's the word, compulsive pull, seem to be driven by, and that's as far as I got, is that there seems to be a need to change the way that I feel.
Mm-hmm. Is it a physical, like to change something that you're feeling physically, or is it an emotional change?
Yeah, it's an emotional, psychological change. It's to feel different than this.
Yeah. So in any of those moments, that's when it's really relevant to pause, if you can, before you actually have the brownie or whatever else, and just feel into what specifically right now is the thing, is the feeling, is the emotion that is calling out to be changed.
Repeat that. I want to make sure I understand that.
So before you actually, the brownie is there, they're there, you can smell them, you feel the pull towards them. And instead of just going to it, feel right now which emotion or feeling in the body are you looking to change? What is it that needs to be different and that is going to be different, or at least is suggested will be different if you indulge in the brownie?
Which emotion or feeling would be different? Is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And really feel into, like, right now, there's a brownie out there, and I really want that brownie. So pause and ask yourself, and it's not just like a dialogue, but like, I really want you to feel into the experience. What is that brownie going to change about the way that I feel right now? What am I feeling that I need to be changed by that brownie?
What am I feeling that I need to be changed? Okay. Huh. And so that's not something that really can be answered right now. It needs to happen in the moment when that is actually occurring.
Yeah, absolutely. Not unless you have a brownie that, you want to go bring the brownie in and set it in front of you and see how that.
I actually asked them to get rid of it.
Okay.
She didn't like it. She said she thought they came out badly. And I'm like, well, then give them away. Get them out of the house.
Get them out of the house. Yeah. So if you have something like that, whatever it is, it's just noticing before you actually do the action, before you get whatever it is that seems to be the thing that you're craving, you stop and feel into, what is it right now that I actually want to be changed? There's an implication that thing is going to do it. And maybe you'll get a brief hit of dopamine from it, or some other, pleasure, enjoyment, relief, nice taste in the mouth, whatever. But it's so temporary, and it's not actually addressing the real elephant in the body that you keep ignoring. It's that we want to look at and feel, because it's going to be there before and after the brownie. The brownie is only temporary.
Right.
And the brownie is every other drug, alcohol, food, media, anything else. They're all temporary distractions to keep us from feeling something. And so we really just want to be honest with ourselves. What are we not willing to feel right now, such that that brownie seems to be the thing that's going to take it away?
Okay. Well, it's kind of funny that this comes up, because since I first was made aware of the Fetter work, when it was March before last. It was March of 2023 when I had gone through a particularly dark period, and I asked Patty Levin if she could talk, and so we spoke for a while, and she had just in a very kind of easy offhand way suggested Fetter work, and in talking about it, or maybe it was later, I can't remember, and whether it was then or at a later point in time, she mentioned how there were certain things that she had. I don't know if compulsion is quite the word for it, but she had these habits, like she had this thing for chocolate, and there was something else, and how she, after she had done the Fetter 4 and 5 work, that had diminished significantly. Yeah. And I thought that would be fantastic. And so from the very beginning, I mean, even before I'd even really started in on the first Fetter, I mean, you know, I've just found out about it. I've started watching Pernilla's videos for the first Fetter, and my mind automatically is kind of in the back going, you know, just make a note for the future, Fetter 4 and 5, because I'm tired of these monkeys on my back. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's what we're talking about. Another thing that you can do, another good question that you can ask yourself is, when you have that thing in front of you, you can ask, like we said, what are you feeling that you are hoping that this thing is going to keep you from feeling? But also, what else would you rather have in this moment than that thing? So effectively, what could somebody else give you, say to you, do for you? What else could you have that this brownie is just a substitute for?
Give me an example.
Yeah. So it could be that, you know, I'm feeling like this brownie is really a call for, you know, it's crying out for me. And I can't say why. I just really, really want this brownie. But if given the option, if you sit and you kind of ask into the body, into your experience, what could somebody give me or say to me or do for me that would keep me from wanting that brownie? And it might be somebody just saying, I love you. It could be something saying, you know what, Darrell, you're actually a good guy. You know, it could be all of these different things that are underneath the surface that actually this is just a Band-Aid for something that you're not hearing or feeling from somebody else, or most importantly from yourself, but it's something where at first it seems like it comes from an external source. So, you know, it's a hug, it's companionship, it's some form of validation, acceptance. It could be, you know, yeah, I mean, if it comes up that it's like, you know, I just want to go to the movies instead, notice if that thing is just another distraction, though, from whatever you're feeling, right? It's probably something more core, that there's something there that just needs to be, you know, even being hugged and accepted and all of that points you back to that second Fetter issue of not feeling good enough, or being able to self-validate, or, you know, feeling loved, feeling like, you know, you aren't alone as this solitary little body in this dangerous, scary world. Like all of those things, it keeps pointing us back inside to that. So it's really noticing like, oh, this is really not, you know, the like brownie really isn't the thing that I want. I really want companionship. I really want somebody to say this about me.
So what you're pointing towards then is not a brownie or a cup of coffee or the movies or just an hour of quiet with no one around. You're talking about something that's more in the emotional, psychological, interpersonal realm.
Yeah. Yeah, because Fetter's 4, 5 and Fetter's 2 are very closely related.
Interesting.
So we have, you know, like, especially the way that Kevin and Christiane work with Fetter's 4 and 5, it's very much working with the place where the primary sensation arises. So you're in a situation somebody says something to you and you start to feel that sensation in the body and you go, okay, now I'm going to sit in the gap. I'm not going to react. I'm not going to react. I'm just going to sit with the feeling and then see if you can sit with it. Notice if there's any reason to react. See if you can find any sort of connection between this sensation and a reaction, between this sensation and what somebody else has actually said, trying to find, a mechanism for this thing having this reaction that has been a habit for so long. Does it really have to happen? Or can you simply sit with the sensation and allow the sensation to just be and do its thing? And that's really, really helpful. And that alone gets rid of so much of the reactivity because you start to realize that the habitual reaction isn't necessary. It's just something that's been conditioned into existence over and over again. And so we're actually breaking the conditioning that every time, Tuesday says something to you and doesn't want to do what you say she should do, instead of that feeling of like, I've got to lash out or I've got to slam the door or whatever the habitual reaction has been, all of a sudden now the sensation is still there, but there's been a reconditioning that that's not how we behave. That now we just sit with the sensation and allow it to just do and taper off on its own. And it's kind of similar in effect to the, when you get angry, stop and count to 10. There's something to that, I think, where there's like a reconditioning happening. And then also there's a shift that happens as you are doing this, where you really start to notice that what we once took to be a given, like somebody says something to me or doesn't accept, my wishes or command or however, of course I'm going to react to that. We take it so that it's like, it's just written in stone that it only makes sense that if someone calls you an asshole, you get angry and then maybe punch them. Like it's just taken as being like, that's just the natural reaction to happen. And what we do is we question that. Is it really? And then just like you looked for the self doing the first Fetter exercises, you look for, is there any connection here between this sensation and a reaction, between this sensation and having to do something about it to get rid of it, to not feel it, to change the external situation in some way so that you feel better and this will go away.
So you said we're looking to see if there really is any connection between the sensation and the reaction?
Yeah, because we assume that there is. We assume that there's this thing called aversion or ill will or not wanting, where she doesn't do what you want her to do. And there's this feeling of frustration, anger, aversion towards that. And we take that as being a real thing. We believe that that really exists and that instigates and necessitates a reaction.
So we're assuming that the external stimulus necessitates a reaction, right?
Yeah. And that we talk about like craving as though it's a real thing that exists, and dislike as something that really exists, as though it's this almost external force or an emotion that comes into play. The same way that we break down all of the emotions, like we talk about anxiety as though it really exists, that I have anxiety right now, or I have depression, or I am feeling really blissful, or I'm feeling angry. We talk as though these are all like a real thing that has swept in, even if we consider it like an emotional weather pattern, we still talk about it like this hurricane has moved in, as though the hurricane is a real thing that has passed through and then left its wake of devastation behind. We talk about that. This wave of depression has come through and it has left this wake of depression, of devastation in its wake. It's that same way that we talk about it, but there is no such thing as a hurricane. You have wind, you have rain, you have hail. That is what we call a hurricane, but each part of it is an individual experience. We have blowing trees. We have roofs being torn off houses. We have, lightning, thunder, but each one is its own little experience that we put together into this whole thing called a hurricane. Anxiety is just sensations in the body and thoughts about a potential future that is not currently in your view right now. And when we break apart any of these emotions, any of these into their component parts of sensations and thoughts, we find that there isn't anything real there. And the same goes for craving and aversion, where we feel like craving is a real thing. The demon of craving, the monkey is really on your back that is causing the craving. That it's like it's something that needs to be fulfilled or that I need to resist, right? Like the craving for that brownie has come up, and it is a real thing that I need to battle or give into.
Okay.
That's how we talk about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's looking into what the hell is craving? Is that thing real? Is that actually something which we are battling or caving into?
And that's when a little bit ago when you said that when that compulsion appears to just sit with the feelings, that's actually what you're saying, is to begin to break these things down and see what's really there, right?
Exactly. Yeah. What really broke it for me working with 4 and 5 was when I was not just with aversion, not just looking for the reason to react. I was actually looking at what is aversion? Does aversion actually exist? Is there really something here called aversion? And the same thing can be done with craving. The same thing can be done with any emotional state or idea that we have about something being a certain way. We really look into the direct experience. In your direct experience, can you find anything that is craving or not wanting aversion?
And that can be with anything, right?
Anything.
Okay. Because, something that comes up a lot is this whole situation with Tuesday's boyfriend. I mean, especially lately, that's been almost a daily thing.
Mm.
And it seems to me that that would be a great way to begin to deal with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, in something like that, you bring up whatever part of the situation tends to be kind of hot for you, where you start to feel that emotional tension, burning, heat, however it shows up for you, that primary sensation.
Okay.
And then look into where is the actual not wanting in this situation? Whatever it is that you don't want him to do, the not wanting of him being in your life or Tuesday's life, the not wanting of him being the way that he is.
When you say where is the actual not wanting,
No,
so you're talking about trying to locate where that's being felt in the body?
exactly. And or the mind. What
Okay.
are the experiences right now of not wanting?
I mean, because I could tell you that with probably every instance, if not almost every instance, I mean, just giving a margin for error there, there's always something going on right here. That kind of tight, contracted feeling that just seems to be just a big no.
So feel that sensation, feel that contraction.
Okay.
How do you know that this sensation means no?
I don't. It's a total assumption. It's this idea, one, it's something that's been experienced on and off over a period of decades. And so it's a conditioned idea. I mean, that seems to be what it looks like when I start looking at it. And then the other thing is that, so conditioned idea. And then, hang on, let me get back to it. the conditioned idea just creates that assumption that that's all I'm seeing, an assumption based on a conditioned experience.
Mm. Yeah.
Did I miss anything, or does that sound about right?
Well, I mean, you can continue diving into the experience, because what we want to happen eventually is to notice what you just noticed, and that there's nothing there that doesn't seem like a conditioned experience. But instead of just going to the conclusion, it's a conditioned experience, and now put it up on a shelf, and now I know what it is, we really want you to just feel it, so that I hate the word, but grok it, so like you really get it, that intuitive shift can happen from seeing it very, very clearly, that there really isn't anything there that is telling you that you don't want this in that way.
So let me make sure I'm understanding you.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to, the old expression that, that I've understood you too quickly.
That's okay.
So what you're saying is that we continually investigate these things whenever they come up, and we're investigating and reinvestigating and reinvestigating with an eye towards the idea that eventually what happens is, instead of just an intellectual understanding, there's that deeper body understanding of this is just something that's been learned. This is just something that's been conditioned. There's nothing here that really indicates or supports the idea of aversion or wanting to get rid of this thing somehow. That's all how it's being interpreted as a result of previous experience. But like I said, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's not a head thing. It's something that through repeated practice becomes understood on a deeper level.
Yeah, absolutely. Another aspect of that, though, is to then also look into, do you need to do anything about this now? So if all that's there is a sensation that you can see does not actually mean no, and it doesn't actually mean I don't want this, do you have to do something about it?
If it doesn't actually mean no, if it doesn't actually mean I don't want this, do I have to do something about this? If it doesn't actually mean no, and if it doesn't actually mean I don't want this, it seems like it's kind of begging the question, what does it mean? Because the common assumption would be that most people would, if they're dealing with something that they find unpleasant and don't want in their life, that feeling, I'm having a hard time with expressing the idea, that feeling, well, it's kind of a feedback loop, that thing out there and this feeling in here kind of mutually reinforcing each other, with the idea that, yeah, I don't want that. In other words, it's easy to understand how somebody would come to that conclusion. And I know you're talking about how to begin to dismantle that, but I feel like there's something in between those two things that I'm not quite, it's not quite.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'll answer on one part of it, and then it brings us back to what I had started saying earlier, and then we kind of went a slightly different path.
Okay.
When you are in that moment, you just want to look into, do I need to react to this? So instead of creating meaning out of the sensation at all at that point, we're just looking at, there is sensation here. Do I need to do something to not feel this sensation, or can I be okay simply feeling it and letting it pass through like it always does? So the issue with her boyfriend comes up. You feel this wave of sensation in the body. You immediately normally assume that wave of sensation means that you don't like this, you want the situation to change, you feel this absolute resistance to it, and that's just the way it is. So my first question to that is, can you simply be with that sensation as it arises, and then allow it to be there, not do anything about it, don't even go to thought to distract yourself from it using some sort of rationalization or other dialogue or saying, oh, but he's really blah, 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 blah. None of that. That's all a reaction. Come back to the raw sensation itself.
Okay.
So that end of it, you can actually have a significant weakening just by feeling into, do I actually have to do anything about this? Or can this sensation simply remain? Is that okay?
And let me ask for some clarification.
Yeah.
When you say feeling into, what does that mean specifically? Because that sounds like it means something other than just to feel.
Yeah. So when I say feeling into, I'm basically talking about checking in with the felt sense in the body and then also the mental experience. So you're also aware of what kind of thoughts are there, if thoughts are there. Are they trying to distract in some way? Are they reinforcing a story? Are they saying how, of course, I should do something about this? Because is there a whole narrative happening on one level? Is there a feeling of no, 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 I have to do something about this. Is that kind of a something that's, even if it's not verbalized, that feels like a tone that we're experiencing as almost like an emotion or as a certainty. And then investigating again in the five senses, internal or external, how do you know that? What information are you getting from the senses that are telling you that I can't handle this? This can't be this way. I need to change this. I'm very uncomfortable with this. And I do not want this.
And we're trying to find what it is in our internal experience that actually confirms that.
Yeah, you probably won't actually find a thing, but like what you'll probably find is something where you said like there's tension in the body, and there's an assumption that tension means no, I don't want this. Then okay, is it really? Question: what are you actually experiencing? I'm feeling contraction. If you don't have a thought attached to it, what is that? How could that possibly have a meaning? How could that possibly say no just because it's that?
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're continuing to dissect the experience in that moment to see if there's really anything there that is a fundamental creature of wanting or not wanting something.
Okay.
And then there can be a realization with that that's just like, oh, I really don't have to do anything about this. Somebody really can say what they want to me or not do what they want, and it really doesn't matter. And that's one possibility, but it's not the only way that we can work with this.
Okay.
So especially when we're working with other people, talking about other people and issues, interpersonal issues, that sort of thing, that's where the bubble of reality is really useful. Because this is where it starts to tie back into the second fetter as well as the fourth and fifth fetters. So in other words, the issue that you have with Tuesday's boyfriend, now there are elements like we've talked about in the past that might be coming from what seems like ostensibly a compassionate place from your perspective. You are worried about her welfare. You're worried about, aspects of her being, and that's really commendable. And there's no, we're not going to say there's any problem with that. But where it's relevant is to notice, using the bubble of reality thing, what is it specifically about his behavior that irritates you the most? And then we can look back at whatever that thing is and then see, how does that remind me of me? How does that remind me of an element of either my behavior or a way in which I wish I could behave, but am not allowed to because of some other factor?
Oh, I know that we've been already talking 45 minutes. I wish I'd mentioned this sooner. The injured dog that I told you about, he's because Susanna and Tuesday have left. I'm sure you can hear him.
Yeah, that's
him snoring.
Oh, that's hilarious. I thought it was like a phone ringing the entire time. And because I was
I was
like,
going to ask, do I need to do something about him to try to maybe?
his
Okay,
let him snore. It's okay. It's
okay,
so funny because I was like just figuring out maybe there's nobody home and the phone just keeps ringing and you're because it sounds as regular as a phone ring. That's hilarious.
well, I'll tell you what. Hang on, I can do one thing real quick.
That's okay. Just let him sleep. Let him sleep.
Okay, I didn't know because the thing is I'll watch these videos later, and like I started turning off the email when we talked.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much noise that made.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's not that loud to me. Plus, I'm used to it, so the brain kind of filters it
Yeah.
out.
Totally. Totally.
But I don't know what it sounds like on the other end or what it's going to sound like on the video. So I was concerned about it being
Thank you.
problematic. So
It's so funny because actually we're talking about Fetters 4 and 5, and if people get irritated by that, this is a perfect thing to work with for them. So anybody who's watching this video, if you have been annoyed this entire time by that ringing dog snoring in the background, this is a moment to feel into the body, find out why. What is the sensation that seems to be making that sound so irritating to you? And then doing these same practices that we've been talking about, see, can you sit with that sensation? Is there a need to react to it? Do you have to turn the video off? Do you have to get outraged? Do you have to write an angry comment saying, we need no background noise in these videos and you shouldn't do this because it's very unprofessional and blah, blah, blah. And then look into also what it is about that speaks to you in some way. So if you have issues with the very, very low budget nature of the video, what is it about your expectations or about your need for things to be in a certain way so that the question is, do you have a problem presenting yourself in a way that is just raw and unpolished? Do you feel the need to cover up with makeup or clothing or other what do you call them, affectations, things in which you might so that people can't see the real you that's underneath there that you're afraid of them seeing? So any of those things, right? Whatever is happening, we can use that as fodder to look into, why is this irritating to me? So like I was saying with Tuesday's boyfriend, why is it that his particular behavior, and you can go kind of one at a time of these things, is so irritating to you in that way? Not to say that we condone every behavior, but the fact that it causes such a reaction in you means that there is some stickiness in there.
right.
We can see animal abuse on TV and feel sad for the animals and feel outraged about wanting, it's just, this shouldn't be. I feel it's against my moral convictions. I want to go demonstrate, sign papers, do whatever, sign petitions, do whatever. That's fine. That's one realm of things. But the question is, if in you feel like this real strong impulse because you feel so angry by it, or you feel so helpless and victimized for the sake of those animals, you feel, just really, really deeply sad, and it affects you in a way that is beyond what would be just a sort of, I hate to use the word just reasonable, but you can see something happening and you can have concern for it, you can take action, but there doesn't have to be an overwhelm to it where it basically knocks you off of your pedestal of stability. If it's something where every time an advertisement comes on TV for, animals in a shelter and you have to turn it off because you feel so emotionally unstable because of that, that's an indication that there's something to look into about your own patterns of feeling victimized, or your patterns of feeling helplessness, your patterns of whatever identification that whatever identification with that kind of situation you yourself are feeling, that gives you the opportunity to then look into, why do I identify with this in such a way? What is this pointing back to in me?
Okay.
And then that brings us back to the second fetter, where we then work with all of these old issues that haven't been met yet.
Okay, boy, that raises another question. Okay,
Yeah.
so to make sure that I'm getting the fundamental core idea. So the first thing is, when something comes up, whatever it is, whether it's a brownie or a cup of coffee or my daughter's boyfriend, where it starts, the absolute beginning is sitting with that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? And so we sit with that feeling and we just feel into it. And where do we go from there? I mean, we feel into it. Now what?
Yeah. So there are a couple different paths here to take. So if you want to simply work with the reactivity of it, if it's something where it's so strong for you that you just fly off the handle every time and you can't handle it, then we need to dial it back, get it under control enough that we can then do some other work with it. But if it's something where it's so fast that you're immediately off the handle, then we can work with it after the fact. So if it's something where every time it happens, you just rage out and you don't even have a moment to pause, then bring it to the cushion afterwards. And then you just sit down, bring to mind the situation in such a way that it still stimulates some of those sensations, and then sit with those sensations and see if there's any reason to have to react to those. Do you have to do something?
Okay, well.
That's the first one.
Okay.
Okay. So then once that has kind of weakened a bit, then you can start to look into when it happens and you feel the sensation, like in the moment, then maybe you can, in that moment, while it's actually happening, still sit with it and just feel the sensations moving through the body. Notice any thoughts that are coming up, trying to distract from it or trying to amplify it and move you to some sort of action. Sitting with those as much as you can, because any of these sensations are only going to last for seconds. If we don't continually amplify them with more thoughts, they just fade away. So we really want to see in the actuality, in the moment when it's happening, can you just be with it? Can you sit with it? Can you allow the sensations just to taper off naturally on their own? Or be there for as long as they need to be. We don't want to have any sort of judgment that they shouldn't be there, or that we're, if we take the position that we're doing this just to get rid of them, it defeats the purpose. You're already showing aversion to the aversion. So not where we're going with this. Simply sitting with it for the curiosity of, can I sit with this? Do I need to react to it? Is there any reason that reaction has to happen? I'm sitting here talking to the person, they're doing something that I feel morally is repugnant. I feel like I disagree with everything they say, but do I have to react to this sensation that's arising in the body? Can I just be with it? Can I just allow it to be in a heightened state of agitation? And then allow that agitation to naturally subside.
And you're saying that just by doing that second one, by just allowing these sensations to come up in the moment, feel into them, let them be, posing the question, can I be with this as it is, whatever that sensation is, eventually weakens those, just that simple process.
It does, yeah. And sometimes it's as simple as actually seeing for yourself that you don't, like, that the reaction isn't necessary. It can be a paradigm shifting revelation just to be in a situation where you have reacted predictably to that same sort of situation over and over again for decades. And then all of a sudden to feel that you're in that situation again and you don't have to play out that same old playbook, that all of a sudden a different situation arises where the same external thing seems to be happening and you're just sitting there with sensation, not doing your regular tried and true response. That can be really life changing just in that, because you can really see like, oh my God, it was never necessary and it's not necessary going forward.
That sounds incredibly liberating.
Yeah, it is. So that's one way. Now, however, if it still seems to be really sticky and that's not doing it, because again, when I was saying before, when the sort of Kevin and Christiane method of working with 4 and 5 tends to deal with that sensation, the reactivity from once the primary sensation has begun to we sit in the gap, and then the question is, do we have to do anything in the gap or can we just stay there? So that's what we've been talking about mostly this time.
Okay, there's one thing I need to get clarified,
Yep.
or some clarification on. I've heard that term over and over.
The gap.
Yeah, but I've never heard anyone really explain it well, so I'm still
Sure.
unclear on that.
Yeah, the gap is just sitting in that primary sensation. It's that feeling of dynamic tension where it feels like something is there's an agitation, something feels like it wants to move, it needs to move. It's like a calling for action where it just feels really uncomfortable or icky or unstable to be there. And so we want to be there. That's where we want to just sit. And so it's not a gap like an emptiness gap. It's actually a gap of fullness. It's like the space between one kind of sensation and a reaction. So it's the gap between the primary sensation that's there and the reaction. But the gap is really just sitting in the sensation. It's like it's more sitting in the fullness of the sensation as opposed to the idea of like a gap between two things happening.
Okay.
It's only a gap in terms of like there's the way that normally things happen is I'm here, I'm stable. Somebody says something to me, it sparks the sensation. There's a brief moment of feeling the sensation, which is the gap before boom, it has triggered the reaction, and then you are off and doing your normal thing in reaction to them. So it's that pausing in between. Somebody says something to you, you feel a sensation, pause, and then we stop the process for a moment so that the reaction doesn't happen like it normally does. And then you can really observe. It's like if you had like a remote that paused time, and it's like pause the time for a second so you can really like look around the situation and be like, okay, what is happening here? Is there really a need to play out this same situation the way that I always have over and over again? Do I have to react to this? And then you can just take that moment to look around and go, "Good, I don't. It's okay. Actually, I can just stay in this paused moment for as long as it needs. And I don't actually have to yell back. I don't actually have to go to the refrigerator and get the brownie. I don't actually have to have a beer. I don't have to do any of that. I can really just sit here in this paused moment for as long as it lasts."
Well, the great thing about this is I'm going to get a ton of opportunities on any given day to work with this.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Because it's
Blessed life.
Yeah, because things have really accelerated, and we don't know why. I mean, Susanna talking about needing a break and things like this because the third member of this group has become really something else
Okay. Wow.
to interact with. So yeah, I'm just blessed with golden opportunities repeatedly through any given day.
Wonderful. But now it's a recap. So or to recap and go forward. So what I was saying is, that method of working with this starts from the primary sensation and it works to see if you can sit in the gap and then not react. So we've covered all of that.
Right.
But the question is, why does the primary sensation have to happen at all? Why is it necessary that when somebody says something that you don't like, you have to have this clenching in the chest and through here, and this feeling of tension and this feeling of heart racing and heat and adrenaline and all that?
And that is a good question, because it doesn't seem necessary.
And it's not, because not everybody has that same primary sensation from that same situation.
Right. I didn't think about that. Okay.
So there's always something about you. And we use the phrasing, like when we're talking about the other side of it, where it's from the primary sensation to the reaction. Like Kevin has the phrase that I really like, where it's asking, what is it about you that makes it so that you have to react to this in a way that somebody else wouldn't? You know, when we're talking about any of this from that side of the thing, that side of the equation, it seems like there is something about you specifically that needs to react to this situation, whereas me or somebody else would just be like, oh, don't really see the big deal there. Okay. You know, it just doesn't, you don't feel it. So that's the question of why you have to react at all. But this is a question of now, why does that primary sensation even have to come up at all? And so this is a question, what is it about you specifically that makes it so this primary sensation even can arise? And this is where it often brings us back to the second fetter. Because this is where that primary sensation is most likely coming from. It's coming from some sort of belief about ourselves, some sort of old trauma, some old emotional pattern. Something about the bubble of reality that points us back to something about you that is triggering because there's a personal identified element of this particular situation.
Okay.
And when we talk about 4 and 5, we're talking about just as much identification as we are with the first and the second and the third and so on. It's just a slightly more subtle version of it, but there's still a dichotomy between the me who wants something or doesn't want something, the identification of being triggered by this thing or craving this thing. There's still so much identification built into that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Hang on. Okay, I know what it was. And I don't want to distract us or digress from where you're headed with that, but I wanted to be clear on something. So this primary reaction brings us back to Fetter 2.
Yep.
And you said it's about old trauma, beliefs about self. So that seems to imply that that means doing more detective work with Fetter 2, because, for instance, speaking just for myself right now, the only thing I really know with any clarity with regards to Fetter 2 is that starting toxic point, or that toxic starting point of the black sheep, the scapegoat, you're the one who's wrong with this situation belief.
Yeah.
And all along I've had a sense that there are probably other things lurking, but haven't gotten to them. It's just that has been almost enough in and of itself in the last 10 or 11 months of working with all this stuff. But there's always been this nagging sense that, well, there's more that has remained unseen. So it sounds like working with Fetter 4 and 5, when it brings us back to 2, means that there's more digging to be done.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why we're so adamant about doing that kind of work as we do this stuff, because otherwise you can get to where you're just not as externally reactive as you once were. If you're just doing the sitting in the gap, looking for a reason to react or not, you can very much let go of a lot of that conditioning that has led to more external reactivity. the acting out of old patterns. And that feels very, very liberating. And that feels amazing. And there's no question about that. But there's a question of, do you have to live with that primary sensation being triggered all the time? Yes, you don't have to do anything about it. And you've relearned that now you don't have to do anything about it. And that's wonderful. Stuff happens, and instead of reacting, it just kind of slides off. And that's great. But you might still be feeling all sorts of physical discomfort that once would have led to a reaction, but now just leads to you feeling shitty for a minute or so.
Well,
And that feeling shitty for a minute or so is a clue to something that is still in need of investigation. And so that's why we suggest going back to the second Fetter at that point and seeing what's the cause of it. And the benefit of this is, if you do enough of this stuff ahead of time, you can really make working with Fetters 4 and 5 so much easier, because when those primary sensations don't come up, there's nothing to work with. You don't even have to work with reactivity and craving if you don't have anything going on in a situation to begin with.
right. But, well, I can't speak for anyone else. Just in my own case, it seems pretty clear without being able to say for certainty. In other words, I couldn't say what some of those other second Fetter issues are.
Yep.
But just the reactivity, just the fact that some of these day-to-day life things can create that moment of feeling uncomfortable, which, frequently for me, that there's not any big fireworks with it. In fact, there really isn't ever. It's a very rare thing that there's any kind of overt external reaction.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is there's this sort of clamping down, kind of restraining oneself, and then having to walk around for a period of time with that uncomfortable feeling, which even just that by itself, without adding anything else to it, is not my idea of a good time.
No, absolutely not. And I applaud the fact that you're not externally reacting to those things, but if you feel like you're clamping down and really forcing it, that's still not what we're talking about with having, yeah. So,
it's not what I want either, by the way.
yeah, no, I gather that. I gather that. Yeah. The clamping down, in a way, I can see that as being a way of keeping from externalizing it, yelling and doing all of that. But on the other hand, it's also still a way of keeping you from feeling the sensations. Because that clamping down is a new sensation. It's a new distraction that you're doing to keep from simply feeling that discomfort.
Yeah, you're right. That had gone unnoticed.
So that's why we really, for doing this, you don't have to force anything. You don't have to clamp down and root it out. It's just sit, just feel it, just notice it. It's probably not going to be comfortable, but it's okay. Can you sit with it as uncomfortable as it wants to be?
Well, let's clarify something here. Usually when things of this sort are happening, it's out in the house in the common areas. So something comes up, ask Tuesday, hey, can you take care of this? And then she gets, just really snotty, really hateful in response. And then there's that reaction. Do I walk to some other place to be by myself, or do I just kind of stop right then and there in that moment and just let it happen there? I mean, what's the ideal way of responding in order to sit in the gap with that sensation?
Depends on how strong it is. That's why we have options. If it's something where it's so strong that you really don't feel like you're going to be able to handle it without saying something back, then yeah, go to another room, bring it down, bring up the situation again in the mind so that you have like enough of it to work with, but not so much that it's just overwhelming. And then kind of do it in stepped up doses like that. If it's something where it feels like it's okay to just stay there with her, being as mad at you as she wants, or being as sarcastic or snotty or anything as you feel she's being, just sit there and just feel it. Really like bask in it. You know?
It'll keep those, being in the room with her will definitely keep the sensation going for a little bit longer, however long that might be.
Yeah. So if you can, roll with that. But then it's really important too. So again, first one is to sit with the sensations, see if there's anything that has to be done about it. Do you have to react? Do you have to leave it? All of that.
When you say have to leave it, what do you mean?
Do you have to leave the room? Do you have to leave this?
Okay.
Do you have to escape from the sensation in some way?
I see. And when you say does anything, you're checking to see does anything need to be done, you're talking about does there need to be a reaction?
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, it's anything as visible as leaving the room or yelling back to something as subtle as some sort of very gentle misdirection of the mind, where thoughts will come up and they'll start to say, yeah, she really shouldn't have said that. Like any of those, like reinforcing thoughts that's like, I really think I'm in the right here. Anything that is taking you out of the sensations by means of pulling you up into the thought realm. Just notice that those are still reactions. They might be prolonging the sensation. They might be making it worse, because you might be telling yourself a story about how unfair this is and how it happens all again. And that might be happening, but it's still a reaction. It's still distancing you from the raw sensation of the raw experience of sensations that are happening in the body.
So any mental activity.
Any mental activity.
Okay. So in other words, the ideal is for the mind to remain quiet.
Yeah, as much as possible. But it's really about just, even if it does, just come back to the sensations. Notice that it's happening, come back to the sensations.
Right. You
might find that you get on the mental thought train really fast and don't even notice that you've been on it for a couple minutes before you come back to the sensation.
Okay. So but the idea is to stay out of that, to stay with the sensation.
Completely.
Okay. I mean, because it's going to make noise. That's a given. So it's understanding that, it's going to make noise. Let it make noise. Just don't get caught up in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
And then the other part of it is when you're working with this on your own, when you are taking this like onto the mat, bring up that situation to mind and kind of feel into, okay, she said this to me and it made me feel immediately that primary sensation just so strong, so not okay. What is it about you that makes it so that matters, that she said that? What is it about you that is personally relevant that she acted towards you in that way?
Okay.
Coming back to the bubble of reality. What is it that her saying that reminds you of in you? A belief that you have about yourself that this is reinforcing? Or some way that she's behaving that you would like to be able to behave but can't? What is it that comes up when she says something that you take to be snotty or rude or sarcastic?
Say that again.
When you say something to her or ask her to do something and she responds in a sarcastic or snotty way, What is it about somebody responding to you in a sarcastic, snotty way that is so triggering? Is it because it brings you back to your days of responding to people in that way?
No, because you may take this with a heavy amount of disbelief, but even though as a teenager I could be an ass at times, my daughter has taken it to a whole new level.
So what is it about that is deeply upsetting?
I have asked this, but I don't think I've dug deeply enough because the only answers I've come up with, and I'm not content with the answer or answers, are things like there's this presumed position of what I'm going to loosely call authority, because it's not authority in the usual sense, but the fact that I'm a parent, it's my responsibility to make sure that things are taken care of in the home, in our family, and left to her, none of it would be done. So here I am trying to take care of things for the common interest, and this is the response I get. Thanks for having no regard for the position I'm in. I'm trying to think of some of the other answers I've come up with in the last however long. There is something that has come up about this belief, and the belief has not quite fully revealed itself. It's like it's kind of trying to hide still. It's like it's kind of peeking out from behind the corner, but it not quite willing to be fully revealed. But there's been this sense that when she responds like that, or when anyone responds in a way towards me that's unkind, that it's sort of like there's this nonverbal sense of, oh yeah, they're right. I'm not worth a flip. Yeah, I don't have any value. They're right. I don't.
So that's where, if it feels like she's not showing you the proper respect, and if that's reflecting back to you your own lack of self-respect, then of course, if you don't feel like you are giving yourself the same respect that she is also not giving you, but that you want from you, that same self-respect that everybody wants, then there can be an extra bit of weight to her not showing you that. That feeling of being devalued reinforces that sense of being valueless that you've had.
Well, the second one I definitely agree on, and the first one I'm not disagreeing. I just I think there's some gray area there, because the whole thing about self-respect and being in the parental role is something that I view with a certain degree of suspicion, because I really have grave misgivings about this whole hierarchy. I mean, yeah, a teenager can only be given so much, whatever you want to call it, latitude, or I don't like the word because it's not the right word anyway, but authority or self, what is the word? Self-determination, for lack of the word I really don't get, because they're a teenager. And given that, I mean, with the exception that, with rare exception, most of the teenagers in the world are not going to do what needs to be done for their and other people's own best interest. Absolutely. But setting that aside, there's still this, I just view anything that even smacks of authority with an incredible degree of suspicion. I just think there's always this sense of, there's probably a better way to do this. This is something that's evolved over a long period of time, and we're used to doing it this way, so that's why we do it this way. But I have a feeling if we all sat down, as a species and figured out a better way to do this, we could come up with something much better.
No.
So there's that. So I have some grave misgivings about so-called authority, but that doesn't change the fact that I think you're right in terms of something about self-respect. And I feel like I kind of got lucky when the toxic starting point revealed itself. And when I say revealed itself, I mean there was this intention to find it. There was this sense of, okay, we need to figure out what this is now. This is important. We need to see if we can uncover this. And then it just kind of revealed itself. But I don't, there's this sense of, okay, well, how do I find out what that is? I feel like in some ways I kind of got lucky with the first one.
Yeah.
And so now it's, okay, well, now we have to find more. Well, how in the hell are we going to do that?
Don't stress. Yeah, don't stress, first of all.
Okay.
It's really noticing, because you have, oftentimes these things are so closely connected. So that there have been so many issues that all revolve in that, as you said, the scapegoat, the one who's always wrong, the being of,
The one
yeah, it really doesn't impose a problem. It really isn't worth anything. All of those things that keep coming up still are in need of help. And there may be some other thing in there that hasn't been found, but there's enough meat on those to really keep you, I think, as much work as you've done with them already. It sounds like there are still more goodies in there to be worked with and uncovered. So rather than immediately looking for something else, I would see if more of that just needs some more attention. There's more of the love and the understanding, the questioning of the beliefs that have been underpinning so much of your life.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I was listening to somebody talk. I don't even know who it was. I wish I could remember who it was. It was somebody I normally would not listen to. It's the kind of thing that normally I would kind of raise my eyebrow and go, yeah, sure, okay, But something about it caught my attention. And so I was listening to this person talk about, I don't even remember what it was, but somehow they came across this issue. And this mystery person, whoever it was, said something about how these beliefs are passed on to us by our parents and teachers and other people. And that's just their belief. Why would we believe it? And I'm not putting it as well as they did. They actually said it in a way that's really effective. And it really kind of caught me.
Yeah.
It really just kind of, I just kind of had this, it was like the light turned on.
Amazing.
And so I walked around for a couple of days just reflecting back on that, the fact that, well, this was just my mom's belief.
Exactly.
She was no one in particular. In fact, she was a really very broken, very messed up woman. She was somebody who she made my issues look like nothing.
Yeah.
And it was amazing that she could even parent even as poorly as she did, let alone live her life the way that she did for a period of time. And so why would I give any authority, any credence, any substance to that at all? And I just kept reflecting back on it because every time I would reflect back on it, it would just seem to hit it home even further that this is just the belief of a very flawed person. And they were just dumping that on me. And there was no substance to it at all. And so that has added something new to it. But even having said all of that, still, really all I'm left with in terms of, and I'm saying this with an eye towards the question, what more can be done? Because you were saying, it seems like, some more needs to be done around this. What more can be done? I still fall back on the affirmations on a regular basis. I reflect back on the fact that this is just the belief of a very, very unhappy and disturbed woman who would just dump things on her kids that they didn't deserve to have dumped on them. you know, but is there more that could be done? Do I need to be doing that? You know, I don't know.
One thing that I would recommend is based on, just this kind of work, it's doing sort of the flip side of what we just talked about. Whereas, so in the situation where you are, talking to Tuesday, she says something back to you and you get upset. Now you could do the whole practice that we just talked about, with all the things you could do in that moment. And you can look at it afterwards as, what is it about this that is so triggering to me? And if you just feel into that and investigate it, you might get these answers. You might, if you feel into the sensations and ask, what does this remind me of? What is it that I find so problematic when somebody says, when they don't value my opinion, or when they don't listen to what I say? You can ask these kinds of questions and then see what pops up.
Okay.
But the flip side of that is, when you're actually in the situation, when you know already that you have issues with somebody, not you have an issue when somebody doesn't value your authority isn't the right word in this case, but they don't seem to respect you. They don't. They make you feel undervalued or not worth anything or a problem or whatever. You know that those are there. And so then it's every time that pattern gets triggered, every time that belief gets reinforced, in the moment you recognize, oh, there it is again. That the situation isn't really that you are necessarily the problem. It's that that problem button just got pushed again. And you can then notice right in that moment, that's just that belief again. Okay, am I really the problem in this situation? Or there it is again. And then you can break apart the actual situation. Am I really the problem here? Is this just an immediate belief that comes online every time I'm in a similar situation? I, for some reason, have to take it upon myself to be the problem, to believe that I'm the one to blame. That is more comfortable for some reason, as uncomfortable as it is, than to believe that the other people around me might actually be wrong, that maybe everybody plays a part and that I'm not the sole problem here, that maybe I am a problem in some ways, but that it's not a chronic thing. It doesn't mean that we're infallible and that you're never the problem. Of course, sometimes you're the problem.
Sure.
But the question is whether you are always the problem in every possible circumstance. And it's having that kind of perspective of like, okay, step back for a moment. I'm feeling like a problem. Did I actually do something right now that is problematic? Or is this just old programming running? And having that kind of clarity in the moment starts to break down the efficacy of that program.
Well, you'll be glad to know something, because I was heading in the right direction and I didn't even know it.
Amazing.
But I haven't taken it as far as you're talking about. So that's the thing, is I need to take it further and use it much more frequently. I mean, as close to any time it comes up as I can get.
Yeah.
There have been many times, especially, it's come up a lot this last week, the things that I told you about in the email, all of those situations brought a lot of that stuff up, and it was something that kind of kept getting brought up in one way or another. And frequently in those situations, I would just fall back on the affirmation and would remind myself, you're not the problem. You're not the one who's responsible for this. You're perfectly fine. You're okay. You're a being, an entity that has value. You don't have to buy into all of this.
Yeah.
There's some of that going on.
Excellent. And it is super useful to also use like the affirmations like that. So I'm all in on the turning it around too. When we do this kind of as far as I'm concerned, just about any of the inquiry stuff, like whether it's looking for the self or whether it is looking for right now, what is the emotion? Is it real, or can I break it apart into its constituent pieces? Or am I the problem in this situation? There's a kind of looking that we're doing with it too that I just want to make sure that we're really clear about. It's coming from a very non-centralized way of looking, meaning it doesn't feel like it's directed from an I who is doing the looking or who is changing anything or who is looking to gain anything from the process. It actually feels like it's like that open, expansive state that we talk about, but it's kind of taking everything in from a little bit more of that kind of place. So when you're looking for what is it about this experience that feels like aversion, or what is it about this experience that feels like I'm the problem, we really want to make sure that we're not feeling located, isolated, contracted into an identification in that moment that is trying to like find its way out of something or trying to manipulate the world to make something happen. This is a more fifth floor view, anthropologist kind of view where we're just curiously surveying the terrain. It's like that, like I said, if we had a remote that would pause time and you could just kind of walk around it and frozen, the frozen scene where everybody's just kind of paused mid movement and you can just kind of walk around freely through it. It's really just being that space where everything is paused and you can just kind of freely survey it all as you're kind of interested, investigate this person's posture, investigate that facial expression, investigate the sensation that's happening over here, investigate this thought that's just floating up in the corner. It's that kind of open, curious, expansive way of investigating that is different than I think we can do when we are. I think it's possible to come at like, especially because when I hear you say that, and I'm not saying that you're doing this. It's just something where I just want to make sure that we're clear on it.
Okay.
When we have the idea that it's like, here's the situation, here's the problem, here's the remedy, I'm going to do it. And then there's a feeling of like control, putting it into action, doing the thing, using the medication, using the practice to get a certain desired outcome. That can be constricting.
It's sort of along the lines of that thing that you had mentioned a while back about watch for when doing things with a purpose.
Yeah.
Seems like that basic same point of view.
Very much. So I give it's kind of like giving with one hand, taking with the other. So I give you the practices to do, but I suggest doing them in a way that is very light and natural and curious and happens spontaneously, as opposed to doing it with like a forceful, this is the desired outcome. And if I don't get it, I'm doing it wrong, or I'm not doing it enough, or I need to do more of it, or, bring it back. Keep it light, keep it curious. The other one just reinforces all of the identification that we're trying to root out, or that we're curiously, expansively allowing to be rooted out. It's just not reinforcing that same sense of the one who is problematic or that is having a problematic experience.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And I'm glad you said it, because otherwise I wouldn't have realized or recognized that it was happening from, because it was, I think more often than not, it was happening from that place of when doing things with a purpose, doing things for a purpose.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So see if while you're doing it, you can, coming out of the body isn't the right literal, interpretation of it, but it's that coming up beyond that contracted feeling. When you feel that sense of contraction, like you're in the situation, Tuesday says something and you feel that density there. Mm-hmm. Are you, so to speak, in that density? Like, is that the whole of the experience where you are completely locked into that?
It's the bigger chunk of the experience.
Yeah.
Because what happens is when that sensation comes up, that tightness, that contraction, that sensation of heat, whatever it is, it does tend to, it's kind of magnetic. It pulls it pulls it kind of pulls into being some sense of being someone, and it's happening in that place.
Do me a favor.
Okay.
So feel right now the kind of total spaciousness of the body, total spaciousness around everything that's here. Don't feel the particular boundaries of the body. You can feel points of pressure. You can feel sensation in certain areas. And does it feel in this open spaciousness that you are particularly dense or located in any one area?
Well, I'm having a hard time answering, because what's happening is somebody is bothered by something, and I don't know what's going on out there. And so every time there's a bark sound, it's like these micro contractions. So I'm having a hard time answering past that.
All right, so that's actually good. This isn't exactly where I was going with this, but let's use this. So you have these little micro contractions, and each time there's a micro contraction, it feels like it draws your attention to it, right?
Yes.
Like that takes up, all of a sudden, the bulk of the experience becomes this micro.
That's where the attention goes.
Yeah. So while you're feeling this, you're feeling the expansion of everything else, but you're feeling these micro contractions pulling the awareness or the attention to this spot and making it seem really big and really intense. Take your toes on both feet and clench them really, really tight. Squeeze the toes in, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Just feel kind of crampy. Do you feel how big that sensation starts to become?
Yeah.
From just cramping the toes.
Right.
But can you feel also that there's this whole realm of experience that's really not just that? That's only something that is drawing your attention briefly in this moment because it's out of the ordinary and because it's fairly intense.
Right.
But it's not actually taking up any more space than anything else in your experience. Your attention is being drawn to it, making it seem bigger.
Right.
It's the same with the micro contractions every time the dog barks. And it's the same with that density through the face, chest, neck that happens when you're in conflict with somebody. The sensation itself isn't that big, and it's not the totality of the experience. It's just attention grabbing.
It's funny that this is coming up, because it reminds me of something I said to a friend of mine in the last week or so. I made the comment to her that nothing that big can make its way into the moment. Because it really can't. I mean, it seems like it, because you're thinking, oh, well, all of these things are going to happen, but those things aren't present yet.
Exactly.
So all that's happening is really just the awareness of whatever it is that you're anticipating. And that's it.
Completely. That's great. Exactly. So just notice at any moment when you seem to be triggered by something, is that sensation really the totality of experience? Is that absolutely everything? Or can you feel all of this other space around it? Even take a moment to clench your toes or your hands, create some other tension in the body, and notice how that is not the only thing that you're feeling. There's all this other stuff going on that makes that so much less important. And it breaks the identification that is any more me, that tension that shows up in a moment of conflict. It breaks the identification that is any more me than your toes clenching or your fists tightening up.
That seems like something that might be a good idea to work with for a period of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes a little doing. I was just a moment ago, as you were describing that, I started clenching my hands as tight as I could. And when I was doing it with the toes, well, first let's go back to the dog barking. With the dog barking, it was impossible to break away from her, so it seemed. Then with the toes, it wasn't nearly as problematic. Then when clenching the hands into really tight, to a tight fist, the sensation of the hands being that tight really wasn't any stronger than the extremely mild breeze I feel from the ceiling fan going overhead.
Amazing. Exactly. Exactly. It's all our changing perceptions of the sensations. And we find when we do the sixth fetter stuff, they are all so malleable. They are constantly changing. It's very easy once you get used to it to manipulate where the sensation seems to be located, how big it is, how strong it is, what it's made of, or how dense it seems to be, how whatever meaning it seemed to have had, its valence of being positive or negative or neutral. All of that is very manipulatable. And this is just, we don't want to do that to bypass so that we don't have to work through any old trauma stuff that's still there or any old beliefs. We don't want to bypass that. So it's useful to be able to work with the sensations as they are. But if they seem so identified, if the sensation seems so big and you're so unable to get any sort of bigger perspective while working with it, it can be useful to also bring them down to size, make them so that they're strong enough to work with, but small enough that they're not overwhelming. They're not the totality of the experience, and they don't keep reinforcing that sense of identification with them the way that they once had.
And so that really is the case. I mean, is that what people report experiencing? Is that by just doing that one simple thing that eventually the identification with tightness in the face or something in the chest or whatever ceases to have the ability to become me, or that somehow brings a me into being?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's I don't know if you remember on the retreat, I showed I don't know if you saw that one. It was in one of the sofa sets. I had the what do they call it? The Kanzi triangle. I can't think of the something like that. It's a triangle that doesn't exist, and it's basically
Yes.
you have like three Pac-Men that are faced,
Yeah,
in
I
a
do
way
remember
that
that.
create the illusion of a triangle. And I loved the fact that I had posted the one that was actually a stereogram version. So, I mean, there's no triangle there. There's just three sort of black Pac-Men facing with their mouths facing the same direction. And the
Right.
bone creates the triangle. And when you see a stereogram version of them, all of a sudden the triangle that doesn't exist pops up off the page. So not only is it non-existent to begin with, but we actually see it in three dimensions, where all of a sudden this non-existent thing seems to be like coming right out of the page at us. And that to me is the best metaphor for the self created by all of these different sensations. The sensations are there. The thoughts are there, but the sensations and the thoughts are just like those black Pac-Men that are just completely isolated individual things, which when combined together have a certain they create well, in the case of with the self, there's been beliefs about what they mean that have been associated with them, and they effectively act as a binding agent or the glue that brings all of these things together and creates this sense of a self out of it. But all we really have are these individual little black Pac-Men, meaning sensations and random thoughts. And so the sensation only has any sort of identification to it because it's been assumed that every time I feel this sensation, there's something identified with it. I feel contracted. I feel angry at this moment. So all of these sensations are the hallmark of the fact that I am angry. I am hungry. So the sensations in the belly right now are the hallmarks of what it feels like when I am hungry. But instead, we can exist in a way that there is a body that is experiencing something that we're going to call hunger, but it's really just sensation in the belly. Left long enough, it causes all sorts of automatic reactions to try to find any sort of food source to prolong the life of the body. even in some desperate cases, non-food sources that may have some borderline nutritional value. We see starving people who will, eat wood bark or, whatever, just to have something in the belly. But it's not because the person is so hungry that they're doing the thing to find it. It's like the body is just naturally driving to find stuff. Like little kids who have I forget what it's called. There's a condition when they're mineral deficient and they eat dirt and like compulsively eat dirt. It's not because the kid loves the taste of dirt. It's because the body is craving a certain mineral. There's a deficiency, and so it's eating dirt to try to compensate. And it's that same way of being that we have, where we go through life, where the things are just happening. The body is just doing the things. There is a sensation that feels hot and tight and constricted. And we can see that we call that feeling anger, but it's not really anger. But again, I say this not wanting to bypass it, because there are different levels of getting to that stage. And it's possible to come at it from kind of the radical non-dual angle and just say, anger's fine. It's just happening. It's just the body doing its thing. It's okay. But that is a way of bypassing getting to the point where anger doesn't happen. Anger isn't necessary. Anger is a reaction to other things which can be worked through, but it's still, we can observe all of it from the perspective where there is no self in there that's actively doing it. It's tricky, because it's like when we're playing both sides of the non-dual coin, we're talking from the relative level and the ultimate level. And ultimately, of course, there's nobody there to do anything. And effectively what we're talking about is causes and conditions. And even by saying that there's something that can be done, we're giving we're giving seeds to the other person. We're giving, the whole system is kind of creating the possibility of doing something, because now information is there that there's something that could be done, and the doing may or may not happen. But it's hard to talk in real life like that, because that's not what our general experience feels like. And it seems counterintuitive and counterproductive to spend too much energy focused on that direction of things. So we use the terminology like doing the meditation, doing the practice, doing the inquiry, because it feels like you're doing the inquiry. And so as long as that's happening, that's what we do. But it's also helpful to notice that there's another way of experiencing that's not always like that. And so for that, I'm just saying that there is a natural activity of the body, which is happening, which does not have a self nature. It does not have a choosing agent doing self that's attached to it. It is, everything is happening based off causes and conditions, but it's not useful to dwell on that when it comes to whether or not to do practices like this, because it is possible to fall on that as the talking about that can become just another cause to not do something, right? Like a person has no proclivity one way or another, but they hear one day that somebody comes up to them and says, you know what, you could be a model. I think you could be like you could be a runway model. You can make millions. I think this should really be a thing. Maybe they've never even considered this before, but all of a sudden, oh yeah, that's okay. That sounds like a good idea. I think if you think I can do it, I'll do it. And then the life path goes that completely different direction. If somebody else had come up to them and said, the teacher said, you know what, you have excellent scores in math. I think you should actually become a scientist. Oh, okay. So then maybe they go the scientific route. And those two things are completely, divergent paths, each one based on what somebody else has given them as validation or instigation in some way. There's a cause that has happened and a different condition becomes of it. Telling somebody that there is nothing to do. There's no one to do it. There's nothing here. The body is just doing its thing. There are no practices, is effectively like telling somebody that you should become a model, and then having that become the path that gets taken. Telling somebody else that there is a you who can do these practices. And, if you think of like the Vajrayana training, where it's like, you have to carve so many of these little idols like before you can even get into the door of getting some training and some teaching. And then, you have to do these practices to get to level after level after level. That itself becomes this other path where there's like a doer that seems to be fostered in that, until you get to the point where the doer just kind of falls away. So there are pros and cons to feeling into either of these experiences while you are doing these practices, but we don't want to get hung up on the belief in either of them, because they can be a bit of a hindrance.
Well, you said either of them. Which two are you referring to?
Oh, sorry. That you either have like that there's like agency that is doing this process and doing the practice every time that we
Okay.
that it comes up, like do the practice, look into it, see that there's no anger, allow that to sit with the sensation, allow that to just dissolve, right? And the opposite of that there's no self, there's no anger, there's no problem there anyway. Like your reaction a moment ago, you didn't think to oh, I'm going to jump now out of startle. It's just the body's reaction to a loud noise that is unexpected. It's that same thing. But I give, and it's not just for you. This for anybody who's watching is why I'm giving this little rant, because there's a danger of taking that even that insight that there is no anger here, that there is nobody experiencing the anger, and that the anger isn't real. There's a possibility of then taking that on as a belief, and then going forward, that becomes a way of just bypassing everything else, so that you don't have to look into anything more. You know that you're still getting angry, that things are still happening, but you use that as a kind of get out of jail free card to just
that would possibly work.
Yeah, but people do it a lot. And so that's why I bring it up, because I don't think you're necessarily the prime example of somebody who's going to do this, but knowing that this is being public, I do want to kind of make that caveat that it is a trap that people fall into, and it can be really problematic, because you just get stuck in a place where if you concede, if you take on the insight that you have, that there is nobody here and there's nothing to do, and there's no problem with any emotions that come up, and that everything is just sort of doing its thing, it's lifing, that can be a real insight that you have. But when that becomes calcified into a belief that you then use to go through your day, and then you're using that as in the way where if I stop to question why I'm still feeling angry at somebody, that is contradicting that belief. And so it makes it so the person can't even really investigate it without invalidating that belief that they hold. And then that leads you into a place where now I'm feeling unstable, because I had this belief that there's nobody, and there's nothing to do, and there's no anger. And if I let go of that, there's an identification in that belief that feels uncomfortable to let go of. And so we can't even question that anymore. So then you just end up having to live your life out of this sort of reactivity, unless you can let go of that belief enough to investigate and see that, okay, it feels like I'm getting angry, so there's something I should be doing about it. There's something that I can look into here, because I don't need to get angry. It's not a natural state of the body. It's not something that has to happen just out of a state of regulation. It's just something that is in need of investigation.
Well, it seems to me that the wise way to go about any of this is you have to verify, validate through your own actual lived experience. And if that's not what's really happening there,
Yeah.
then, and I think this goes back to the idea that I heard very early on, which was that traversing this sort of path requires an incredible honesty.
Yeah.
And maybe almost an unnatural honesty, at least according to what most people live with in their lives.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why, and I made that commitment to myself fairly early on. I'm not going to BS myself.
Yep.
And if
Love
I
that.
haven't had an insight or a certain experience, then I'm not going to claim anything that hasn't actually been my lived experience. And it seems like that's sort of the benchmark, is verify and validate in your own experience, being brutally honest with yourself.
Love that. And also verify and validate daily, because we can also come into that. Okay, I've had the experience. I know I've definitely seen that there is no sense of self. I know that there is no craving. There's no aversion. I know it. I've seen it. Great. And then that's like your diploma on the wall, where you never have to recertify. You never have to, do any further training. You don't have to keep up your certification. You just have the diploma now, and then you're good to go. You can forget everything you've ever learned in school, but you still have the diploma. And we can go about our life, our spiritual life, like that, where you see the thing, you have the insight, you really know it deeply. And then you just go about your life, and it can get lost. It can become where all the old conditioning continues, and it continues in a way where it just comes back online. But if you rely on that diploma of, I've been through LU, I've seen through self, I've felt diversion and craving really dropped away. And now you're going through your life and things start to come back, but you start to just write it off, that like, oh no, it's fine. I've already seen through that. I don't have to go back there again. It's just doing yourself a disservice, because exactly like you said, you're not being honest.
Right. Well, and I think that without really fully consciously realizing it, that's what has driven me to continue to, on a daily basis, do these practices of looking for where the decision happens and who's
Excellent.
deciding. I don't know if I'll ever drop that. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the future holds, but right now I'm not, because it seems like that's necessary, because what that shows is something that is still really needed.
Yeah, exactly. And I really applaud your honesty in it, and your willingness to dig in over and over again to the same things that are there, as much as is needed, because that is often the way that we have to do it.
It sure feels like it for me.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just
No.
It's so many years of ingrained conditioning of the way that we see things, the way that we assume things are, that have never gone unquestioned, or that have never that have gone unquestioned, because why would we think to have questioned them? And now we're questioning them, but it can be very, very sticky. So we just keep doing it. We just keep doing it.
Yeah. And honestly, in a weird way, and I don't know how to express this to somebody, how it is this way, but it's strangely kind of enjoyable. It's almost like playing a game or
totally
solving a puzzle or something.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's why I always say, I try to emphasize we're doing it with curiosity and with that kind of childlike fun of, it's not a dire thing that we're doing. We're just investigating. Like, isn't it weird why we take the world to be the way that it is? Why we believe that things are the way that we think that they are, especially when other people seem to have very different views of the reality that we're in. What is it that's making my world seem this way to me? And then just get curious about it.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I mean, that's a good reminder. I've heard that before, but it's been a while. And it seemed like, without knowing it, without actually seeing it, that there was beginning to be some kind of risk of maybe taking things too seriously or doing them with a very serious sort of kind of determined, that's not really the right word, determined or very grasping sort of trying to get something out of it sort of attitude, which that's counterproductive.
Yeah.
That's counterproductive. And as you pointed out, it reinforces the idea of somebody doing something, trying to get something, and that's counterproductive. I mean, it all is. Or maybe it would be better to say that's why it's counterproductive. So
Completely.
I appreciate you saying that, mentioning that. Now, I mean, we've said a lot. We've been talking for 2 hours, and in the interest of trying to make sure that the core essential idea is understood, because it's going to happen the minute I walk out of this room.
Yeah,
I mean, opportunities are going to start presenting themselves, and I want to meet those opportunities.
Definitely.
Because I told you the story. It's, in fact, when we first started this, the very first video, you asked me to kind of give a synopsis of how I wound up in my life to even want to or have an interest in doing these things. And I mentioned, I'm going to let her out in just one moment. Sure. No decision was made, by the way.
Yeah, amazing.
It just, I love that. It's all I ever find is things are just happening.
Because they are.
Right. But at one point in all of that, there was, I'd mentioned that a series of circumstances had happened, and what it led to was this understanding that I hadn't gotten sober and gotten to that point in my life in order to be miserable. And that's still very much the case. There's not a willingness to live this life in that way.
Yeah.
And people could say that's self-serving, and maybe it is, but why should anyone suffer? It's optional. It's not something that's required of anyone on this planet.
Exactly.
So, there's still very much a strong drive and commitment towards that. So having said that, the minute that we log off and we go back, we go about our separate lives, that will be at the forefront of the mind. And so with having said that, the idea is, at its simplest, it's something comes up, there's a reaction, we sit with the reaction. Whether it's here or somewhere else, we're being present with that reaction and feeling into it.
Yeah, I would just rephrase the use of terminology, only because we're specific when we use it, so that there's kind of a consistency.
Okay.
You go out the door, something happens, and there's a primary sensation, is what we call it. That's not the reaction that we're talking about. Isn't the sensation in the body? Okay. So there's a sensation in the body. There's some sort of like emotional tone that comes up. There's some tension, ickiness, uncomfortableness that shows up for you. Then you sit with that. The reaction, when we talk about a reaction, that's like what you do to escape from that sensation.
Okay, so the primary sensation is the thing that comes up in response to the stimulus.
Exactly. And the primary sensation is the thing that is there because there is probably some second Fetter issue that is leading to that primary sensation's existence. So it's that's why when I asked, what is there about you in particular that makes this instant, this issue triggering in a way where it would not be for somebody else? It's noticing why that primary sensation has to arise at all. That's where we do that secondary investigation. It's maybe not right in the moment, but it's to just kind of go back and do some reassessment of like, okay, so why was it again that as soon as she said that, I felt that? What was it about her saying that that triggers that sort of identification in me? And then working from there.
Well, it's interesting because that in that moment you said, "Why is there that identification?" I don't know if you said that earlier. If you did, it went right past me.
Sure.
It never, that was that got overlooked.
Okay. Perfect.
That in that moment, that primary sensation is a moment of identification.
Very much so. Absolutely. There's something there which is identified with my story about her not valuing me and me not valuing me and me being a problem and all of that. There's definitely identification built in that. But then there's also identification in the me wanting this situation to be different. I want her to just take my suggestion when I say, can you please do blah, blah, blah. I want her to carry out my request without saying something back to me. But that's not happening. You're at odds with the moment in that way. So why is it that your assumption that the moment could be different is causing you problems right now?
There's that idea again.
Yeah.
It could be different.
Exactly. We always have, when it comes to 4 and 5, we always have the idea that something is problematic now, but it could be better. It could be different if only X happens. And the imagination is always going to create an X no matter how good things are, no matter how many of the X's that we've thought about in the past we've actually gotten, we'll still want another X in the future. There will always be something that we can get that'll make this moment just a little bit better. Of course, it won't, but we're conditioned to believe that that's going to be the case. And so it's recognizing that right now in this situation, I have asked her to do something. She has responded snarkily. I'm feeling sensation in the body. Full stop. That is what is happening in this moment. If there's any thought that it should be different or it could be different, or I wish I had a daughter who did everything that I wanted every time I asked her to, I wish I didn't have this sensation in the body, I wish that I was living in a mansion, I wish that all of my dogs were very, very quiet, I wish that, whatever the thing is, it's not happening. You realize that you are immediately jumping to some imaginary alternate universe where this could be a possibility. And you're comparing that alternate universe with where you are right now. And of course, where you are right now is always going to fall short of our imagination, because our imagination can create what seem like paradises until we're there. Then the imagination will create something else that's paradise plus one. But
Right.
But it's impossible. So just recognizing that you are literally creating all of your suffering in this moment because you are deciding that there's something unacceptable about it, that it needs to be different for me to be okay. And I need, I can imagine what it would be like. I could probably picture all the things that will make it better. It could be a brownie. It could be all of these different things that are going to make it somehow better. But they're not here. You can't. In this moment, there is a situation where you are standing here feeling a sensation in the body. That's it. Can you be with that? Can you do it? Can you deal with it? Can you just feel it? Do you have to do anything to change it? Do you have to do something to try to get to that imaginary paradise? You're never going to be able to get there. So can't you just be with the sensation?
That's, I think, the simplest summation you have presented in this entire conversation, and I'm glad you put it that way.
Good.
I mean, that it's really just down to something happened. That's a primary sensation. And I think you said full stop.
Yeah, that's it. That's all that's here.
Yeah.
And that's all we can do. That's all that is happening. There isn't anything outside of any given moment other than what is experienced in that given moment.
Wow. Yeah. Well put.
Everything else is mind created fantasy. But we live like 90 some percent of our life in that mind created fantasy.
Yeah.
We spend so little time in actual direct experience with what's here without putting some other whole narration on top of it. Without thinking, yeah, every time we're doing something and thinking about what we're going to do next, you're living in the mind. You're not really here. Anytime we're reactive, that she said this and I'm doing that, and then I'm running all of these reactive stories going over and over and over again in the mind and all of this stuff, it's not here. None of that is in the room.
Huh.
Coming back to the actual silence of the moment with the other person, where there is simply a feeling, a playing out, things are happening without there being some alternate version of or a parallel life that you're living at the same time, where I'm having a conversation with you, but I'm also thinking about what I'm going to be doing in the next 2 hours, or thinking about how great of an interview that, or a great of a session this was, or how terrible it was. And, you know, all the shoulda, couldas, and maybe I shouldn't have done that, or I should have said that. Or if we spend so much of our time doing that while we are having conversations, while we are engaging in other things, while you're out walking the dog, you're not really walking the dog. Your mind is doing 50 other things at the same time.
Right.
It's that sort of thing that we are constantly out of the present moment with. And it makes it very easy then to be reactive when we're so used to living in that mental world that, of course, we just assume that when somebody says something to us and we respond back and have our reactions to it and all of that, that's just a necessary thing, because that's the conditioning. And we're just back in the mind playing out role after role and story after story. None of it's real. It's not actually happening. It doesn't have to happen that way.
Well, and that raises one, not a concern. One thing that is kind of I don't know, it's not a sticking point. It's one of those things that, how do you deal with it? And maybe there isn't really any way to deal with it. Somebody says something, and you know how it can be. If they say something that really presses the right button, the mind, of course, will immediately get involved, and it will produce some of the most convincing thoughts possible. And so you understand, okay, I just need to be with the primary sensation. I just need to be in this gap right here with it. But the mind is, whispering, and it's very convincing. And as you said earlier, you can get swept away by it and not even realize it's happened until after it's been going for a while. I assume there's really nothing for it other than just to try to catch it as quickly as possible and come back.
Yeah, because those are exactly the thoughts that I was talking about when I said that they are still reactions. They are the distractions keeping you from feeling that primary sensation.
I heard you say that, but I didn't really recognize the full implication of what you were saying, because what you're saying is that is some part of the mind that's saying, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to feel that. No, anything other than that. Okay. Yep. I see. That's helpful to know, because that's one of those things that puts in that little piece of conditioning that creates a little more determination to not get caught up in that, because we know what game is being played there.
Yeah, completely. Fully.
Okay. All right. That helps.
Yeah. The more convincing and potent they are, the more bullshit they are.
I believe it. I really do. That sounds about right.
Yep. The more they're just there trying to pull you away, and they're convincing and they're potent because over many years, those are the sort of things that have been shown to be effective to get you from feeling the sensations in the body.
Golly.
You've been, It's like having ad execs in your brain, you know, like they've done market research for years and years and years to find out what's the most effective way of getting somebody to buy into their bullshit. And this has been going on. It's like, you know, the marketing execs and the and like natural selection of the mind where you've really honed this perfect distraction machine. And it's so good at what it does. So
Well,
we're undermining that.
and with that in mind, it seems like, I mean, I'm not sure, but just sitting here now thinking about past experience, that the times when there was a reaction and then got caught up in some sort of battle of wills or some kind of unpleasant exchange or whatever, that was actually on some level unconsciously preferable to feeling the primary sensation. Like, I'd rather get into an argument with this person than have to feel this.
Completely. Exactly. So much of what we do that comes up is actually not at all comfortable. You know, the distractions that we have are not necessarily comfortable, but they're still preferable in their discomfort to sitting with the primary sensation.
Okay.
It's the lesser of two evils.
Okay. It's getting clearer as we go along. This is interesting.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a I know it's not going to be perfect. In fact, I know it's gonna take a while to really kind of zero in on it. But there is a very strong determination to do exactly this, to go ahead and face down the uncomfortable sensation.
Love it. It is extremely liberating. And it often is not nearly as long and arduous and you know, repetitive as it seems like it's going to be when we start. It for some people it takes a long time. For other people, it's surprisingly quick once you really start to just be with that and to investigate and break down the assumptions that have always been there, that craving and aversion are real, the assumptions that I have to do something about it, that I really have to fight off this craving or just give into it, or I have to say something back because, you know, I just can't let it go. You know, you hear people say that, so somebody says something to them, it's like, I can't let it go. It's just one of those things. And it's like, as though it's like, you know, gravity or something. Like, I just, it's a force of nature. I can't not say something back when somebody says something to me that I don't like. Just can't let it go. I have to say something. You might want to look into that. You know, like that might not actually be true. But it's interesting to find out why that seems to be such an unquestionable response.
Well, I'm looking forward to working with this, knowing that it's at a more, it may have more intensity to it, or it may have, I don't know, there's something about the energy that may be stronger than my very limited experience with this. I know that years ago, something that I was told by actually our old friend Don Murado.
Oh, yeah.
And so where I wound up applying it was with music, because I was constantly surrounded by music that I just found deplorable. And I think it took about, I think maybe right at a week. And after about a week of just constantly working with it, I got to the point where I was just really immune to it. And I still am.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It just kind of rolls off my back, regardless of, no matter how, you know, all the little stories that are created about, you know, how it's bad or why, you know, why there's a problem with it.
Yeah.
So it's already been done once, and I know that's pretty low level stuff, but, you know, that just points towards the fact that this is something that can be done.
Yeah.
Any one of us who chooses to take this on can do it, whether it takes a few days, a few weeks, or much longer. It's a very doable thing.
Absolutely, it is.
So I'm already going into it with this confidence.
Love it. So love it.
So it's not going to be perfect at first, but that's okay. We're not looking for perfection.
No, no, it's just that the honesty that you talked about is really the most important thing. It's
Yeah.
recognizing when it's happening, being honest that it's still there, that it still needs some investigation, honest when it is seen through, and then honest when it's not. Honest when it's like, oh, okay, that really got locked back into that reaction again. It was doing well for a while, seemed to be weakened, and whew, boy, did that come back. Just being honest about it really, 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 really helps.
Yeah. Well, I'm okay with that because what's the point of doing it if you're just going to deceive yourself?
Exactly.
I mean, you might
Exactly.
as well just find something else to do.
Definitely.
Whatever
Definitely.
that might be. I mean, because I mean, either we're looking for a way out of the self created suffering, or we're not.
Yeah, exactly. I
So,
love that.
and I know I've had enough. I've met my quota. I'm done.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, well, you've come a long way, and it really feels like you're in the perfect environment now to really dig into these things, and it's
right.
actually very beneficial. Because if
Yeah.
you were in a very serene, quiet environment, living by yourself, it's very easy to miss a lot of this stuff and to feel like I've worked through it because I'm not being triggered every day. Okay, well, let's go out, interact with other people, and find some triggers for you.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like that old adage about if you think that you've come a long way on this path, go spend some time with your family. Something.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Ram Dass. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Spend a
Yeah.
weekend with you. Come here and light and spend a weekend with your family. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So
So, all right.
love it.
Well, it's been great as always.
Same, same. It's always such a pleasure. Um,
Yes.
hopefully this will give you a lot to work with, and
Oh, it will.
good, be good.
Well, the opportunities are boundless.
Yeah, yeah, they are.
But that's that really is a good thing. That's not sarcasm.
No, no, it really is amazing. It really is a benefit. So I take every moment of it as an opportunity for investigation and a possibility for liberation. Any moment can be the one where it's like, that was it. Saw through that. That thing can fall. And sometimes with the 4 and 5, it can be a very gradual, slow unfolding where you just start to recognize that the reactivity is weakening and craving is weakening and it's just going down. And sometimes you can have a really profound shift of like insight where it's like, whoa. And then after that, things just start to feel very different. So there's no one right or wrong way of experiencing it. It's just like every other stage in the path. It's unique to the individual doing it, but just being honest and aware of what is still triggering in some way and what no longer bothers you and what does just slide off your roll off your back.
Right. Okay. Well, nothing to
Mm-hmm.
do it but to do it.
Exactly. Good luck. Have fun walking out that door, meeting whatever else is on the other side of it.
Well, I'm going to get to spend a lot of time with primary sensations, so it's fine. It's nothing here is going to kill anyone.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just sensation and it doesn't last if you don't keep stoking the fire of it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's the one thing that sometimes gets overlooked is the fact that it'll keep just smoldering away, and then some time goes by and realize there's been all this thinking going on, and not even the really overt stuff, the stuff that's kind of almost nonverbal.
Yeah.
I don't really know how to explain that well, but
Yeah. I
I
know what you mean.
realize that stuff's just been churning away. I'm like, well, that's why that feeling is still there.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. So however much attention you can focus on the direct, the direct experience outside of thought, the direct experience of sensations, the direct experience of the sight, of sounds, really being absolutely present in the room that you're in is so helpful at counteracting even that undercurrent of almost subliminal thought because you're not putting the attention on that. You're really focusing on the actuality where that is just background noise.
right. Okay. That's another good reminder too. Okay.
And also, I mean, like it's good that you're even aware that it's there, because if you're aware that it's there, it means it's not fully subliminal. So there's something where you have, even if you can't verbalize specifically what the thoughts were saying, you have enough idea that it was about this issue. So you know there's something there that it is reinforcing this sensation, because there's something that this is still hung up on. And then just come back to the sensations, devalue that line of thinking, because you can also feel that it is just a thought, just like we did with the first Fetter stuff, just like we did with emotions and all that. Even if it's a thought that's supposedly about mine not being good enough, or that without it being explicitly verbalized, you know, the sensation of emotion isn't real. The one component of it might be the sensations in the body, but the other component of it is that undercurrent of thought that's happening.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's real. It doesn't mean that the emotion is real. It doesn't mean what it's saying is real. It doesn't mean that Darrell is real. It just means that there's an undercurrent of thought that has a negative bias, that's saying something about a situation and complaining that it doesn't want it to be the way that it is. It's fine. It's like having a child having a tantrum because they want a toy in the store and they can't have the toy in the store. Doesn't mean that they're going to get the toy in the store. Doesn't mean that, they can have what they want. The thought can just do what it does. It can have its little tantrum in your mind, wanting the situation to be different. Doesn't mean it's going to be different.
Right.
So recognizing that it's not real. It has no foundation. It has no basis. It has no inherent nature, self-nature. It has nothing to create a sense of identification or a sense of not wanting or craving or any of that. None of that is actually intrinsic in that thought. Simply just thought sensation.
Right.
Just internal sound, just internal visuals, just sensation in the body.
It doesn't have any more substance than what we give it.
Exactly. Nothing real in there.
Okay.
Dissect. Just breaking it apart into, every moment, take the experience apart into its constituent components, then see that in and of themselves, they do not create what you think is there.
Okay. I've got to get better at that. Well, that's not how I really want that. That's not really the best way to say that, but that's something that tends to get overlooked in favor of looking for, looking at this decision-making business. So, okay.
Yeah, just remember, if you took a car apart into every individual piece of the car and had it all laid out on a garage floor, every single piece of the car, you don't have a car. You can't drive the car, right? It doesn't really exist. You have an idea of a car that if all of these things were put together in a certain configuration, then you would have a car that you could drive. But the idea of a car is just a concept. It's a label on a collection of parts that function a specific way.
That's I've heard that kind of explanation for how to look at things, but that's more than just a good explanation. That you're right. That's a totally valid way of looking at any part of experience. Yeah.
Take it apart. Then the thing that you thought it was is no longer there. Doesn't really exist. It's just a concept that we're calling a collection of parts.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's something to work on cultivating the skill of.
Yeah, it's super useful.
Yeah.
Because that really becomes that automated thing. Like what Shinzen Young calls like the magic robot. It's like that. It's that automated thing where you go through life and you don't have to think about dissecting life. It just kind of dissects. It's just kind
Right.
of now it's just sensation and it's just thought and it's just sound and it's just the visuals, and it's not that overwhelming emotion. It's not that believed in experience anymore. It's just components.
Okay. All right. I'm glad you said that. I think that's long overdue to really get more deeply into that.
Excellent.
So, okay.
All right.
All right.
It's been great.
It has been, as always. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good luck with everything. Keep me posted. And yeah, again, good luck on the other side of the door.
Yeah, thank you. And I know you're busy, but if I get stuck or there's confusion, then I'm gonna get in touch and
Absolutely.
let you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Good luck with everything.
All right, Todd. I'll
All
talk to you.
right. I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye.